Meat City, baby.
Hello and welcome back to Meat City Gaming. JD here with another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video. And today we're covering Phase 2 of the new Sith Triumvirate raid. And if you watch the first video for Phase 1, it's Darth Nihilus. And my first impressions after the first run through that phase were, man, it was really hard. And I felt like maybe we'll look back on it and think it was a bit overtuned. Nihilus has so many abilities, so many resistances. You never really feel like you're getting a win against him. The best you can do is use that event buff to block his Annihilate, right? But then you're left with a character on 1% health. Again, we may look back on it and it'll be fine. I think we just need to find the best teams for that raid. But it's a little different now in Phase 2. You face Darth Sion, and his mechanics are a little simpler. He still has basically all the same resistances that Darth Nihilus had from Phase 1, but his attacks and his abilities are tuned down a little bit, and you also gain some benefit at the same time that he does. This whole fight is about one mechanic. It's managing and balancing the cycle of pain and cycle of suffering debuffs. Basically, everything you do in this phase has a chance to put a debuff on your characters. It's uncleansable, other than using the event buff for Phase 2. And when you have these debuffs, the first one is Cycle of Pain, and that's the skull with the lock on it. You can get up to 5 stacks of that. You can get it sometimes when Sion attacks you. You can get it sometimes when you attack him and he has his taunt up. And some other various conditions as well can be met to give you these cycles of pain. They're going to happen. They're going to start to ramp up eventually. And when you get 5 stacks, it turns into a cycle of suffering. So cycle of pain, 5 stacks becomes cycle of suffering, and that's an icon with like a broken skull. The skull has a crack in it. And for every one of those debuffs out in the field, Sion gains bonuses. Mostly the most relevant is offense. He gains offense for every single one of those debuffs that's out there in the field. He can also remove turn meter with one of his abilities based on it. But basically it's about him gaining offense. However, the plus side, and this is the cool mechanic, this is something I was looking for, this little thing in Phase 1 that wasn't there. It is there in Phase 2. You also gain offense on the character based on the debuff that they have. They gain offense up if it's a cycle of pain, and more cycles means more offense, and they gain more offense up if it's a cycle of suffering. So you can kind of play the game, and I think that's what this phase is going to come down to, finding the optimal balance. How much of these debuffs can you take? Because you're increasing your offense, so you're putting out more damage, which is what you want to do in these raids, but you're also upping Sion's offense and making him more dangerous. So the equation is going to be, how many of these debuffs can you leave up and still make it to the enrage timer? If you don't die before enrage, then you got to the end, you got as many turns as possible, then good. If you cleanse debuffs and you make it to the end of the wave and he hits enrage and all your characters are at full health, well, you probably could have taken more of the debuffs on and done more damage. So I'm not here to tell you what the magic ratio is. It's going to take weeks of testing, and anyway, this is Phase 6. This is not the heroic level, so everything could change from what it is in Phase 6 to what it is in Phase 7. So for now, what I did in the run you're seeing, again, I brought my Titans in. They're all Gear 12. They're my strongest team. Not optimized for the raid, not optimized for the event, but I wanted to take my top 5 characters, my Titans team. I'm familiar with them from using them in Arena, and brute force this thing, try to be mindful of the mechanics, and see how much damage I could do. And it's a better result than Phase 1. And the strategy that I used is whenever one of my characters got to the cycle of suffering, then I used the cleanse. I don't think that's right. I've gotten reports from the rest of my guild and from other people that I've seen post videos and comments about the raid. The strategy I would recommend starting with at this point is take on as much of the debuffs as possible. Anyone except your tanks and your healers, anyone that you want to be dealing any kind of significant damage, leave the debuffs on them. Don't cleanse them. Maybe just cleanse your tank, because they're not doing much damage anyway. And so that way, you'll be doing a ton of damage with your attackers, and you'll be blunting Sion's ability to do damage just enough to get through it. And if you survive that, well then try, hey, go crazy and also leave it up on your tanks the next time. So I would start there and work your way down. Again, I ran this team with cleansing when I got to suffering, and I know somebody in my guild with the same team, similar gear level and stats, I think was a little more aggressive and did about 1.3 million, and I did 1.1 million here and some change. So other than that, it's just it's a basic fight. You want to get rid of the ads, I think, leaving them up. Again, if you have a really strong team, a counterattack team, maybe you can leave them up and you don't have to worry about doing damage to them directly. But for me, this team is, again, not optimized. They're gear 12, but they're not fully maxed out. So I did remove the additional threats on the board. If you leave them up, they can get buffed from one of Sion's attacks rather than just getting called back in without the buff if they're eliminated. So it's doing as much damage, cycling your abilities, putting out the hurt, and keeping as much of those buffs on as you can while not losing any of your characters. So it's a little more straightforward. Again, there is this nuance, there is this min-max, this puzzle to figure out, which is great. But it's not, you can bring just about any team in here and do some damage, unlike in Phase 1, when you're battling Nihilus's constant protection regen. That's not really going to happen here with Sion. So bring in any decent team with some synergies, and you're going to be able to do some damage. Again, Jedi Rey seems to be the end-all, be-all for this raid, but in the heroic phase, you're only going to be able to use her team once. So what phase is it going to be? I have a feeling Phase 1 is going to be tougher than Phase 2, so if it's between those two, you'll use her for Phase 1. I haven't gotten to Phase 4 yet. It might be that you need her there in order to get through that phase, so that might be where she goes. For me, there's been reports of Death Troopers' Death Mark making really high damage increases. People have been having good luck with thermal detonators. Jawa Engineer as a healer and throwing out thermal detonators has been producing some good numbers. But again, those are kind of based on health, percentage of health attacks, thermal detonators and exposes from Jedi Rey. And the health for this Tier 6 fight is going to be much higher than it will be for the heroic for Tier 7. So the numbers you're seeing now might actually drop fairly significantly when we get to Tier 7. So we're still figuring it out, but there's lots of things to experiment with. You know, people were saying Cup's time has come to shine because Cup has thermal detonators, and you might actually be able to do more damage with a team like that than a classic, strong arena-type team with those members on it. So have fun experimenting. Basically, it's take the ads down and manage those cycles, and for the most part, I would say don't manage those cycles. Let them stack up. Do as much damage as you can. I think this might turn out to be the easiest of the phases in the raid, and so you're going to need to find kind of the weaker BC squads that you can use for this phase to contribute to your raid. Now again, if it's Tier 6 and you're not doing the heroic, you'll get to cycle your teams again and again, so not too bad. You can kind of see what works, but plan ahead for the heroic. Think about what team you're going to put in what phase, and I think this one is going to be the lower priority one. So that's pretty much it for this one. I'm kind of happy again. You know, Phase 1 can be really hard if they chose to make Phase 1 this big hurdle that you have to get through, but then gave you a little bit of a break on Phase 2 and allow teams that are not as synergized to come in and do some damage there, and you just have to make the choice, then again, that's fine. So, still early, just some first impressions. Again, a lot of this could change, especially as we get to the heroic, but so far I'm really happy with the raid. It's a great experience, and I think things are going really well. So, I'd love to hear from you guys. What are you doing to have success here? Have you done a full cleanse run? Have you done a full debuff run? What are you seeing as the successful way to manage this fight to get the most out of your teams? What kind of teams are you running? Obviously, other than Jedi Rey, we know if you have that character, you're running her in this. But if you don't, like a lot of us don't, tell me what you've been running and what you've been having some success with. Put those numbers below. And if you have a screenshot or if you want to leave a description for how that team works, I'd love to see that. It'd be great to share that with the rest of the community. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you're having fun with the new raid. Phase 3 video is in the works. I've done those runs. It's coming up, so stay tuned. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to be notified when those come out. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.